So if you see it on the screen, just a moment. Yeah. So always remember that whatever technique you use for your material characterization, be very critical about its accuracy and precision, repeatability and traceability and all those things. What you're measuring, whether that value is you can whether it is trustworthy or not. I give a separate lecture series on measurement and analysis, and where some of the serious uh, things are discussed. And most of us make this mistake. We don't really pay attention. We are very happy getting some values out of some instrument, but normally people do not pay attention in knowing exactly what. Uh, please mark your attendance, all of you. I see. Okay. You can answer. You can change your. You can rename yourself. You just type answer. So we because you are.
Sir, my okay, sir.
Yeah, you can rename yourself. Yeah, easily. You don't need to log out. You can while you are logged in, you can rename yourself because Manisha will be taking attendance. So because we need to mark the attendance. Manisha, please, whenever you want, you can take the attendance and save the screenshots.
Okay, sir.
So you can see that if you calculate the lattice parameters from SAD, the accuracy is only 2%. So please do not forget this and do not try to put extra digits. Nobody's going to be impressed. And I already told you about EDAX. In EDAX analysis, many students try to put arbitrary digits after decimal, which are completely unscientific, and you should not be doing that. There, the elemental analysis like atomic percentage, I mean, there is an error of plus minus 5%, as much as plus minus 5%. So do not try to put several digits after decimal. That is completely incorrect. Even in the d-value calculations, people try to put all kinds of digits. That is not at all uh, not at all desirable. Okay, uh, so please be very careful. And it is true with every technique. Every technique. Yeah. So this is a typical diffraction pattern coming from a thin film of aluminum, lithium, copper alloy, where aluminum does phase precipitate. So this is a typical film, a typical selected area electron diffraction. And uh, wherever you find the reference missing um, in the footer, please take it for granted that the material is taken from William and Carter. Normally, I do write the source as WC. WC means William and Carter. Carter is basically Professor Barry Carter. So if you do not find any reference, so uh, uh, I mean, it's like a disclaimer that the study material is taken from William Carter group. I make sure that I put reference everywhere, but sometime it becomes too repetitive if I'm taking from a single source. So then I take and I take a liberty to remove the reference if it is becoming too repetitive. Yeah. For example, this is from William Carter. Okay, because there is no reference there, so it is from William Carter, and this is not from William Carter, so there is a reference actually. Okay. Yeah. So we were discussing limitations of electron diffraction. Sample must be electron transparent because if it is too thick, then electron microscopy will still be able to give you thickness uh, of the topography of the sample, like the two-dimensional topography, not the three-dimensional one. two-dimensional projection of three-dimensional object. So you can still get the morphology, like you can measure the shape and size. Again, I'm telling you that it will be two-dimensional projection. So we'll discuss about that in next presentation, that electron microscopy can create an artifact easily. Uh, and many people do misrepresent or misinterpret the results. There was a presentation, invited presentation uh, of one research scholar, I think 1 or 2 weeks back. So there, I pointed out the person had interpreted the shape in a different way, and we when we probe, when we tried to help the student, and then he realized that there was a genuine mistake in uh, interpreting the data. And it is very common uh, problem that many times we try to extract some information which is not substantiated by the data at all. So please do not do that. Whatever you claim, it should be supported by your images. Be very careful. These are very high-end tools, and uh, students are always. I mean, there is always a trap that we can exaggerate the claims and publish something not supported. So be very careful. Um, Radiation damage we will discuss in a separate lecture. That radiation damage is not a problem; it's an opportunity also. So radiation damage has uh, generated a separate technique based on electron microscopy, and you might have heard about e-beam lithography, which is actually used to make your uh, patterns for your mobile phone silicon devices, for example, 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer, 3 nanometer chips. So those finally, uh, the foundries, silicon foundries make dies to make mass level transistors on a chip. But initially, I believe that they use e-beam lithography to fabricate few patterns. Okay, so that is the same principle is used, that radiation damage. So I will show you some movies today where you can see some radiation damage, and which is very interesting story. And if you have some magnetic materials, uh, when I say magnetic materials, that means uh, not necessarily diamagnetic or paramagnetic, but there is some magnetic ordering, uh, strong magnetic ordering. Then uh, there is a spontaneous magnetization. So as you know that EM electron microscopy lenses are uh, electromagnets. So uh, the twin lens, one of the upper objective lens and lower objective lens, they are quite close to the sample. So that means if your sample is magnetic, so those field lines from the uh, your coils will get really disturbed. There are so many problems that your samples can jump off the TM grid and get stuck to the magnetic pole pieces, lens pole pieces, and that will be a big problem for the alignment of electron beam, because that will distort the uh, uh, magnetic field lines, and it will eventually distort the electron beam, and that becomes a common problem. So you have to be very careful that that does not happen. Uh, so let us look at the next advanced technique, which is convergent beam electron diffraction. Uh, this is quite powerful technique, but analysis becomes quite challenging. I uh, taught this technique in detail several years back, but it is not. I mean, after that, I did not teach because it's a specialized technique and there is not much interest among the students. Also, if I realize that the students can understand the basic modes, that is good enough. And I found that several students were finding it challenging to even to understand the basic modes. So then I did not took effort to go to the advanced modes, but I make sure that I introduce the subject. This topic itself can take entire week of discussion, and we should be doing that at NCL and elsewhere. But I'm not sure about that. But we'll discuss at some other time. There are some challenges that, yeah. So you can see that in a normal uh, electron diffraction, as I have discussed, that this is a standard. Sorry. So this is a standard technique. So you have this is the electron beam which is coming downwards, and this is the specimen. You can see this double-headed arrow, right? And electrons are traveling parallel to each other. It's a parallel beam, and uh, one of the beam will converge here, the 000 diffraction spot. This one is this, right? And then you will have at angle theta, you will have different beams will focus here. For example, corresponding point can be this one, and this one and this one, right? So, so this is in the electron diffraction images. Any diffraction image is in the reciprocal plane, and that is a gift of nature. So, so, so that means if the d values are larger, so these points will be closer to each other. Okay, so this is in the inverted scale, 1 over denominator or whatever, right? So we'll discuss about reciprocal lattice. Some people may know it among you, or some people may not know. Absolutely no problem. But what if you take a nano beam? If you see the difference between this and this is basically instead of parallel beam, we are taking nano probe. So we were discussing last time scanning transmission electron microscope. So so this uh, is collected area electron diffraction. So here there is a limitation on the area we select. Okay, so you can do single crystal diffraction, electron diffraction using this technique, but in this your sample should be quite diluted here. Otherwise, you may get diffraction from various more than one single crystals which are under that selected area. Okay, so one trick to avoid is that you take dilute suspension of the particles and select the area where there is not more than one single crystallite, which is nanocrystallite, and then you can say that you are obtaining single crystal electron diffraction. I teach these things every year, but I do not see students implementing it and showing me the data uh, when I check the details over the years. I really do not know what is the problem, but these all these tricks and tips I transfer, which are highly practical. But when it comes to taking the samples in the TM room, they all forget, um, the knowledge which I share. I would advise you have to. I think there is there is a disconnect. I mean, because most of the students come straight from uh, after doing masters, so they take pre-PhD course as another theory course actually, which is not. It is highly applied actually. Some students consider this just to have enough credit, uh, you know, score. They just attend it to, you know, score enough credit. So my entire effort is wasted. So please note that MSc is over. You have completed your MSc. This is not a theory one. It is highly applied. Every slide will be useful. in the lab. Please believe me, in entire your life. So you have to take notes and remember those things, because those concepts are buried somewhere in slides. So it is better for you. You have to do this effort yourself, that you take some notes of these tips in a separate diary. And whenever you start your uh, research journey and you prepare the TM sample, those notes are with you. This I'm not going to do that. I mean, if you sometimes students think that everything will be spoon fed. I mean, nobody taught me any of these things. Believe me. I mean, nobody really taught me. Nobody taught me electron microscopy. Nobody taught me anything, any of these things. We are self. My generation is basically self taught. But I am appalled by this generation when I'm teaching those things multiple times, and I don't find actually that students implementing it. I am surprised actually why it is happening. Forget about learning the advanced modes, but the primitive modes are not implemented by the perfection which I teach actually. So this should not happen. Anyway, coming to the next topic, uh, which is about we had some patent inquiry. My one of my student, Shubhas Sadhu, she did PhD in solar photovoltaics long back, and then she went to this big lab in US, photon physics lab. She was a chemistry student, but she went to a very big. I mean, she's doing very good. Uh, she was the first person I taught in a in-depth electron microscopy. I was teaching everybody in my group, but she took extra interest, and she turned out to be implementing those ideas in the research. I mean, she implemented actually some of those ideas into her PhD, and that's the reason that she was doing very good in her postdoc. And so she filed a patent, and some patent query came yesterday. I was discussing with some of the colleagues about that. So I would like to share that experience. Probably it will help you in your research career. So that is the reason. Otherwise, there is no point of sharing. So we were claiming a new method of silicon oxide uh, nanoparticles and graphene quantum dot um, co-synthesis in using paper ash or whatever. Method can be anything. This method was made a machine also, like a reactor, where we could do a continuous supply of the silica and graphene quantum dot composites. But now our TM was showing silicon oxide, which is silica, nanoparticles separate, quite large in size, and graphene quantum dot around, let's say, 4 or 5 nanometer, separate. There were two TM images, two classes, two basically bunches of TM images. One bunch of TM images was showing very beautiful large silicon oxide nanoparticle. I think the size was a little under 100 nanometer average size, and graphene quantum dot obviously were less than 10 nanometer. Now the question came that, okay, you are claiming that they are composites, but you are showing that they are separated. So what might be the reason? Would you like to discuss this point? What might be the reason why we were seeing a separate population of particles? We were not showing the composites. Some of the people who have done TEM would like to, but those questions will be, those answers are going to be from my group. So I do not want senior student from my group to answer that, because they already know it. Anyway, so the answer lies in the sample preparation. So normally students, what they do, and it is appropriate for them to do this. I mean, we were discussing about sample preparation. So they sonicate the sample, right? The purpose, it's a standard technique. It's a standard operating procedure to sonicate the samples vigorously. in the solvent where the particles are dispersed to basically de-agglomerate or evenly distribute the particles in the solvent, right? Uh, so that you get a true representation of your synthesis. Sometimes it happens that there is a gradation, size gradation. Larger particles will be somewhere. Suppose it's a colloidal suspension of particles. So it usually happens that lighter particles are floating at the top part of the vial, and then heavier particles. So there is a natural gradation. You can put dust in water in your glass tumbler, and you can see always that after a few tens of minutes there will be gradation. Heavier particle will settle down. So here silica particles are naturally much heavier. Silicon, elemental Z number is 14, right? Silica is fairly heavy, and carbon 6, that carbon graphene quantum dots are naturally very light. So if you sonicate them, this composite is going to break, de-agglomerate. It will not be composite anymore, because there is no strong chemical bond which will keep the carbon and silicon oxide together, right? It's not there is no strong chemical bond. So obviously you are going to see carbon particles at one side, and silica at another side, and you may see them together also somewhere, at some places in TEM, but then they will be well separated. Actually, they will be. You can show them. I mean, for example, you have uh, a classroom where you have, certain students wearing pink shirt, and or some wearing black shirt. So both are visible, but both are distinguishable. Both are separately. You can define the boundaries of those particles. When you can define the boundaries, then that natural question arises, that are the composites actually. So answer is that you don't. Uh, I mean, how to solve this mystery? That you don't sonicate them, just broadcast them on TM grid, and you will see large agglomerates, which will not be visually appealing, because the aim of PhD student is to finally analyze the particle size. So Shubha might have vigorously sonicated those particles, because her purpose was to calculate the the statistical analysis of morphology of quantum dot, because she has to report it in the paper. If it is in the aggregated form, she can't calculate the size of graphene quantum dot and silica separately. So, but that became a source of a question. Okay, so then I explained to my colleague that this is the case, and then that was communicated in the patent filing. Okay, so somehow my computer is running.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes,
Sir,
ma'am.
I'm
Who
Ansar.
are you? Are you from
Sir,
Maharashtra?
sir,
Ansar. Okay.
sir. Sir, was it because the heterogeneous solidification or sedimentation? Like, means,
I would say bit sedimentation will be a right term. It,
okay, sir.
yeah, not necessarily this. I mean, I would not say this sedimentation is when the particle actually sediment, they settle in the bottom. But there is something in between that. They don't settle in the bottom of the vial, but they are occupying because of gravity. See, there is in colloidal suspension, there is a competition between gravitational pull and Brownian motion, right? And steric hindrance and charge is Coulombian interaction. So gravitational force does not always completely win that it will pull them down, but they may be there. Those silica particle may be somewhere in the bottom half of the vial. Got it? But they may still be in the suspension. Sedimentation is a very strong term. Got it? Yeah, yeah. Sedimentation is a very strong term, which happens when sedimency is if you how do you sediment the particles? Basically, colloidal particles are prevented from sedimentation because they are charged. The moment you make them neutral, the Coulombian repulsion will be gone, and van der Waals attractive interaction will take over, and they will immediately agglomerate and they will settle. That's the trick actually we use in synthetic chemistry, and when we synthesize Fe3O4 nanoparticles, what we do, we basically precipitate them by playing with pH. We just put NaOH, and then boom, the negatively charged particle will be now neutral, and all the particles will settle in the bottom, and then we can store them and in a powder form. Suppose we need samples in the powder form, so they'll be out of solvent actually. They will sediment easily. Very easy way of sedimentation is that suppose you know that your particles are negatively charged, so put some counter ions so that you can make them neutral. Immediately you will find that there is a sedimentation actually, and you just leave it on your desk and go for a cup of tea, and come back, and you will find that you can remove the solvent from the top, and you can easily extract the powder, actually powdery soot or whatever. So there are okay. So this is basically okay. I was explaining the yeah. So if you have if you converge the beam, then electron diffraction, this dot becomes a disk. Actually, you can see that this is a dot here. This becomes a disk. So you can see that this dot becomes this disk. This is a disk, and you can see a lot of finer structures, and there are a lot of patterns, and which gives a lot of information about structure. Okay, and so you can see that this is a selected area electron diffraction using a parallel beam. Okay, got it. And then you can convert the beam and change the angle here. You can see that this is a large angle. This is you reduce the angle here. This is for the largest angle. This is for the smallest angle. And when you change the angle, you can change the pattern actually very easily, right? So there are a lot of advantages for CPED, and for example, some of the advantages are explained here, that you can see Kikuchi bands here too, and you can see Lavey zones, actually holes and zoles and all kinds of things that I teach separately, but not here. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and you will love it. Even if you bring 11th standard student, he's going to love this topic, because it takes straight you to a fantasy world. Believe me, it has nothing to do with the electron microscopy, but it will. I'm telling you something, and then a question should pop up in your brain, and it is very provocative statement in front of your eyes. I was talking about electron diffraction, and I'm telling that at any given time, there are not more than one electrons traveling down the microscope column. It's very outrageous statement. Suppose you have this sample, and what I'm telling you that the electrons which are coming from the source are not like a raindrop, rain shower. Okay, they're not like normally we draw like this. So it's like, a leaking ceiling, like tap, 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 like this. Okay, one drop, नीचे चला गया, sample से पार हो गया. Another drop came and नीचे चला गया. समझ में आ गया?
Sir, hello sir.
Yes.
Sir, then how can we say it electron beam?
यही तो मैं बोल रहा हूँ, हेमंत. आ गया ना क्वेश्चन? बढ़िया. that was, I wanted you to say this, all of you. Yes.
Sir, wait.
Hemant is telling that Hemant has already asked this question, that how can you say that it's an electron beam and it is electron diffraction? Yes. Anything else, Hemant? Anybody else? That's the question number one. Yes, unmute yourself. Whatever objection you have, you please let me know. Pawan, Tinku Sekia.
हेलो सर।
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
सर उसका आंसर ये होगा कि मतलब इलेक्ट्रॉन एक एक करके टाइम लगा के नहीं, मतलब विद इन नो सेकेंड्स और नो टाइम इट ट्रेवल, सो इट इज कॉल्ड लाइक बीम मे बी।
No, beam is, you can call it as a beam or something. That is not a problem. You can call it as a beam. See, it's a layman term when we say electron beam, because it's traveling in certain path. Okay, that's not actually a big question. You are missing the big question actually in smaller problems. That is just a convention actually. We say electron beam, but it is a beam because you are right actually, answer that it is still traveling in one direction. Electrons are traveling in one direction. As long as they are traveling in one direction, how do you know? You say that photon beam from laser. How do you know that there are there are more than one photon at one time? You do not know. Have you checked? No, you never checked. You just
No,
assume.
sir.
You just assume that. You are just assuming it. So when we say 300 kilo electron volt beam and free emission gun, we always say that अरे इलेक्ट्रॉन की तो बारिश हो रही होगी जबरदस्त, ऐसे पुणे में मूसलाधार बारिश होती है, पुणे की बारिश की टाइप से।
Yeah, sir. Just like that.
ऐसा लग रहा होगा, अभी तक तो तुम्हें ऐसे लग रहा था
Yes, sir.
इलेक्ट्रॉन पूरा छा गया है, पूरा भर के, मतलब इलेक्ट्रॉन आ रहे हैं, ऊपर से बरसात हो रही है, और मैं तो अपना इलेक्ट्रॉन अपना सैंपल हटा लूं, डैमेज हो जाएगा, रेडिएशन डैमेज। हाँ,
Yes, sir.
it's not
Sir,
like that.
actually,
Because
I
current
just
is, see, let me tell you, current is in microampere, and probe diameter is in, you can say that it is in very small. We were discussing about nanometer, and for normal EM it is not in 1 nanometer, but it is fairly big, like 100 nanometer, but their current density is smaller actually. Yes, anybody wanted to say something? Yes, you are please unmute yourself. So you can calculate that, because for a typical current in TM, it is in less than microampere, right? So that means in within 1 second. Sorry.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, this is maybe due to the electron is falling in a cloud manner.
In a
Cloud manner, sir.
no. Electron.
Not like a single electron, but
No. It's not like that. I think who is asking this question? What is the name?
Mayur, sir.
Mayur.
Mayur,
you are a
Mayur,
physics student, right? Mayur?
Yes, sir.
So you should not ask. You should not use this term, right? You should. Yeah, I mean, physics students should know the basics actually. Anyway, no problem. Electron is not like cloud manner. There is nothing like cloud manner. We don't say like that. Cloud manner we say when we are not able to, pinpoint its location. We say that with, suppose for example, we use electron cloud for the electrons which are orbiting in around nucleus. What is the reason that we use electron cloud term? Because of Heisenberg uncertainty principle, we cannot pinpoint their location. So we use that electron cloud. That electron is like in, that does not mean that electron there is a cloud actually. Okay, so, but in the measurement time window, electron is moving so fast. Okay, it's orbiting so fast that, and also we can't because of Heisenberg uncertainty, we cannot locate the atom. So we say that it's a cloud actually. But here it is different. Electron, we are controlling the electron. We are generating the electron. We are shooting the electron in certain direction with certain energy. We have a control. Within an atom, we don't have any control. Do you have any control? Can you speed up the electron in inside an atom? No, you cannot do that. The electron energy is fixed inside the atom, right? Okay. You cannot just kick the electron and oh चलो थोड़ा तेज चलो इलेक्ट्रॉन चक्कर लगा रहा है न्यूक्लियस के पास में, तुम ऐसा नहीं कर सकते. यहाँ कर सकते हो. यहाँ तुम इलेक्ट्रॉन.
Sir, if the electron is coming from the element, sir, then is there any some kind of phenomenon like change in the atomic number, sir?
Atomic number of what?
Like if suppose we take the example of copper. Generally, we use the X-ray source as a copper. So for the copper, we have the atomic number like 27.
Yes.
29.
So the
29.
29. Okay. So 29 is the atomic number of the copper. Then if the electron is
you need proton also, right? You need to change the nucleus also to change entire atom. Suppose you want to make copper to zinc. But that's what you are trying to say, right?
If suppose
you're trying to say that can you convert copper to zinc
emitted from the atom? Yes, sir,
but you need your proton and neutron also. It's a nuclear reaction. It's not just trying to force one more electron.
So is it possible, sir, like there is something lack of the electrons, something like that?
Yes, lack of electron can happen. You can charge it actually. You can kick out the electron from the core, so it will be positively charged, right? But it will get neutralized because you are constantly showering electrons. Okay, so that's the reason that you put it on TEM grade. That is, copper TEM grade. So it's a conducting. It provides you conducting path, right? Got it? Did you get my point? But yes, you can kick out electron from its orbit, and that is the reason that you have X-rays and Auger and everything, right? But you cannot say that I can convert copper to zinc. You cannot say that because that required a lot of changes in the nucleus also. समझ में आ गया? Did you get my point? Where will you put another electron in copper? Like suppose, okay, you have copper in copper. You have 29 electrons. Where will you put actually? Do you know copper 30? There is no copper 30.
Yes, sir.
Is there any copper with 30 electrons? Is there any copper with 30 electrons?
No, sir.
So you cannot do that. Okay. So any other question? So the problem arises that that means the problem arises that and this problem was discussed by Feynman long back. Actually, there was the problem is that I will show you a movie that means electron is self-diffracting. It's a serious thing. That means single particle diffraction. That means electron is behaving. I'm telling you, not exactly it is happening, but it is behaving as such that, for example, you take this double slit experiment. You might be knowing that electron आ रहा है यहाँ पे, ये स्क्रीन है आपकी, यहाँ पे इलेक्ट्रॉन दौड़ा रहा है और ये दो टुकड़ों में बट गया, आधा इलेक्ट्रॉन यहाँ गया, आधा इलेक्ट्रॉन यहाँ गया, और इसने सेल्फ डिफ्रैक्शन किया, यहाँ पे डिफ्रैक्शन पैटर्न बन गया. You have the diffraction pattern, central maximum, and you have you have minimas and then maximas, secondary and subsequent peaks. How is it possible? So if there is not more than one electron at a given time in the sample, that has a serious consequences. That means how can you explain electron diffraction? That's a problem. Okay, is it possible? Is it possible to have single photon diffraction? I mean, if it is possible for electron, it should be possible for photon also. It should be possible for neutron also. Yes, it is possible. So it was not demonstrated until 1980s. It was mentioned by Feynman long back, I think 1950s in his book. If you read Feynman book, I think I have put some. Uh, so basically, what is happening if you look at two slit experiment, you have a you have a plane wave, and that wave strikes your slits, and then you have wavelets, and these wavelets basically, depending upon their phase difference, whether it is a constructive or destructive, you have some kind of pattern. That's an old story, right? But how do you have uh, for example, here Hitachi tried to I mean, many people tried to prove it experimentally, but Hitachi was successful. Hitachi, the company which you already know, that it sells electron microscopes also. So basically what they did, they set up an experiment that they made this electron biprism, and it's an electron source, so you are basically shooting one electron at a time. Okay, so the electron rate is and this is the screen, this is the detector, and you can see that this is the screen. You can see actually whenever one electron uh, comes from the source, and it basically lands on this screen. So you will notice, and you can see that screen on your on the screen. You can see that electron actually. You can see single electron arriving at the detector. So the detector was so powerful that they could see that. And okay, so here what you have is basically they made this electron biprism. So this is basically a charged electrode. So electron has possibility that either it can go from here, or it can go from here. It cannot simultaneously go from both the sides. But then if it goes from this side, then it will land here. If it goes from this side, it should land here. Suppose you are sending 1,000 electron, so you will have only two piles. Classically speaking, in the classical mechanics, what will happen that you will have जैसे तुम क्रिकेट की बॉल फेंक रहे हो, एक तुमने अपनी शीशे की खिड़की में एक तोड़ दिया, एक गड्ढा कर दिया, और उसमें तुम बॉल फेंक रहे हो. I mean, you have 1,000 tennis balls or whatever, and on the other side you have a sand pile. So and you will find that there is only one dheri or pile, right? PILE. So you sand pile whatever. So there won't be multiple. But here in this experiment, what was happening, like they were looking at these several interference fringes. There is a diffraction pattern, bright stripe and dark. This is dark, this is bright, this is dark. So how it can happen in this experiment? How it is possible? How will you explain? It can happen only when this electron is behaving as such that it is splitting in two, and then it is deciding, अरे चलो decide करते हैं इधर से जाऊं या इधर से जाऊं, चलो दो टुकड़ों में बट जाता हूं, फिर मैं बाद में मिल जाऊंगा. So basically, it was because of de Broglie's duality principle, that electron behave as a wave. So yeah, now you can go back to this. Electron is exactly behaving like a wave actually. So then the particle property is not required. So then so they did this experiment. Dr. The Tonomura, he basically, so this is the picture A. And you can see that this is the snapshot. These are the real images. They are not like some, somebody painted.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes.
Sir, in double slit experiment, electron is behaving like a wave, right?
Sorry.
Sir, in double slit experiment, electron is behaving like wave.
Yes.
And we derived it.
Electron always behaves like a wave.
Okay, we derived it from interference pattern.
Sorry.
Then why we are not saying that electron is made up of two or something elementary particles like protons are? Why we are considering it as a single particle? Why we don't say that electron is also a derived particle from any other elementary particle, which we don't know it?
See, it is not. See that. See, electron see all these electron is basically you have these made of 3 quarks which are glued with gluon, right? Okay, electron is consist of some elementary particle, right? Quarks. But we do not need this picture. We do not need to look inside electron to explain this physics. We do not need that concept. Neither we need for protons, nor we need for, yes, we do not need that concept. We don't need to break the electron to explain this. It is not, electron is not breaking. That's what I'm telling you. It is because of the wave particle duality. You got my point?
Yes,
it's
sir, I
not
got
splitting
you.
into. It is because de Broglie, it is another proof of quantum mechanics that electron behaves as wave as well as particle.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So it will be explained. So Feynman lecture series, volume 1, and you can find it online also, page number 460 onwards. It's very good explanation of Feynman. Feynman did thought experiment long back. Actually, these are taken from his book. I have put it for you and he actually started thinking that suppose there is a gun with firing bullets, and it's like a quantum gun. I mean, forget about electron; it's valid for photons also. I'll show you some movie. Okay, and now you have these two possibilities, that one or two. This is a wall, right? And it is possible that this gun bullets can either go from here or here. So if you put this, and this is your movable detector, this can move. You can put it either here, or you can put it either here. So it is now here. So once you put this detector here, so you will see that this is the probability distribution. So this probability distribution will peak here, P1. Okay, because this detector is placed here, so you will have this probability distribution, right? And if you put this movable detector here, so there will be another possibility, and this will be summation. And that's what you see in the basically classical picture, right? But quantum mechanically, if you behave it as a wave, electron is behaving as a wave, then you will get this. This is what you are getting here. Got my point? This is the classical picture, and this is the quantum picture. Do you understand the difference? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
समझ आ गया ना? बहुत ही आसान है ये समझना. भाई ये क्लासिकल पिक्चर है. जब आप एकदम क्लासिकल ऑब्जेक्ट जैसे एक गन की बात कर रहे हो, यहाँ पे एक डिटेक्टर है, यहाँ डिटेक्टर रखा है, तो इसके दो ढेरी लगेगी ना. जब आप यहाँ से यहाँ डिटेक्ट करोगे तो एक ढेरी यहाँ लग गई, एक ढेरी यहाँ लग गई. दोनों मान लो मर्ज करें, कन्वोल्यूट करेंगे, तो ये एक आपको इस तरीके से दिखाई देगा, कन्वोल्यूशन. But this is the quantum picture because its electron is, even single electron is behaving like a wave, and single electron, when it reaches here this wave, so it will form wavelets, and wavelets will again will self-diffract as per the phase difference, and they will form this kind of pattern. That happens in electron microscopy. It is not the theory. It is happening all the time when you take these images, any images. I'll show you some movie. I think you will be happy to see some movies. And